just a minute to see if anyone's here. And we're live. Hello. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Yeah, we are going to be talking about revisions tonight. There we go. The number has updated now. It's like, wow, really? No one here. Say hey in the chat if you're here. We've got a small group tonight, but it should be a really fun chat nonetheless. Yeah, just let us know how you're doing. How's everyone feeling tonight? How are you two feeling, Leah and Kaylin?
It's currently snowing, so I am in between feels right now. I don't know if I love it or hate it. I am sick of it, but I also really like it when it snows.
Yeah.
I am very envious of all of you for your snow.
I am in North Florida, and we are bracing for possible snow in a couple days, which is not something I thought I would say. So,
Are they expecting any of it to stick around, or is it just going to be like?
I have a hard time believing it will. My weather app says to prepare for 2 to 3 inches, which I would expect to stick. But it's kind of weird. Normally in the winter, the rain patterns don't follow our cold front, or they follow them. They don't happen at the same time. So Tuesday night, it's supposed to just like be 35 degrees and start raining, and then it's gonna rain all night. And I'm gonna set an alarm for like 3:30 a.m. and go see if it's snowing. And if it is, I'm gonna wake up everyone and make them come see it with me just in case it doesn't stick. But it's supposed to rain until like 6 in the morning. So we'll see. Hopefully everyone is staying safe and warm with the cold front. Hello everyone in the chat. We've got Morgan, Nicole, and Jo Catherine here. Morgan said, I'm almost halfway through my manuscript, so I'm at the 0 draft still, but I have no idea how I've gotten to that point, or rather, how I still want to write this story. But I know how you've gotten to that point. I've seen you doing the sprints. You were kicking butt in there. So yeah, like I said at the top, we're going to be talking about revisions today. I've put together some like discussion topics, but if anyone has any revisions questions or anything you want to hear us talk about relating to revisions, definitely let us know in the discussion section, and we will be sure to talk about that as well. So my first question of the evening, and feel free to answer these questions in the chat too. We would love to see like what your processes are as well. So my first question is just, how do you guys feel about revisions? Like, where do they rank in the writing process for you?
Better than drafting?
I was going to say, I definitely like it more. I don't like it when I'm revising as I'm drafting, but like after that first draft is done and you just get to go back and like reread over everything and like fix holes and all of that stuff. That's my favorite part of the writing process.
Yeah, I think I like the part of revisions where all of the stuff is where it needs, like I've figured out where everything has to go.
Yes.
And all of the new stuff is written. Like I don't have to draft anything else. And now I can just go in and tinker and fix. And that is my favorite part.
I would agree. Like the revisions process can be so long. As you're like putting together a plan of like, okay, this is what needs fixing, this is what I need to add and everything like that. But like that point where you're like, I know it doesn't work, but I don't know how to fix it. Like that's no fun.
Yes.
I think that's me so much in the drafting stage though. It's like, okay, I know the major points, but how do I get to point A to point B? But I needed that to make sense so that when I get to part C, it's like that smoking gun. So it's like I feel that so heavy during the drafting that like going back for revisions, it's kind of like I could take it easy. I could go at my own pace and not have too much pressure.
Yeah. I was curious what a typical, I know everything is always different on a book by book basis, but what does the typical the beginning of the editing process look like for you? Like, do you full 0 to 100% your first draft and then dive into editing? Do you edit as you go? Yeah.
I think I'm 0 to 100 first draft. Then you have to go in. I never used to be that way. Like way back in the beginning of like the channel, I had videos where I was talking about how like, oh, I do this and like I do the first part and then I go back and then I edit the first part. But then I realized that was like kind of, I was getting stuck because like the first half of the book was so polished and it was good. And like, I didn't know how to end it because I didn't feel like it was at the same level as it should have been. But that was just my brain telling me that because I had already done the first half of the book like 18 times. Once I like got rid of that notion and I was like, okay, I'm just going to write it as sloppy as I can, get it done first. And then I'm going to go back and like fill in holes. And then that's when I can like kind of be like going in and doing the nitpicky thing. And I don't get so siloed that way.
Nice.
I am somewhere in figuring out what works best for me. Because like I do the 0 to 100% in that regard, but I do sometimes if like I get feedback from a critique partner who reads a chapter and I didn't know how to end the chapter and they're like, oh, what if this happens? And I'll be like, okay, I'll go and fix that part before I start writing the next chapter, just because it like helps me with my mind of like knowing where the story is going. But I was thinking about this earlier today, realized that the other 2 books that I wrote and edited prior to the one I'm currently drafting, both times I had to do a complete rewrite. Like after I had done the first draft. Like the first one was like complete rewrite, and then the second one was just like of the 3 POVs, one of them I completely rewrote, or like 90% rewrote. So I was like, oh, maybe this time, even though it's taking me a really long time to draft this book, maybe I'll do it through with not having to do a major rewrite. But then one of my critique partners, she's like, you're already drafting really slowly, so I'm not going to tell you what it is, but like I have an email set up to send to you about something that I think you might want to consider for revisions that could be significant.
Just tell me now.
I know. I say it, and then she's like, nope, not doing it. So I'm like, okay, fine. I'll just continue slowly drafting. How about you, Megan?
I usually like to 0 to 100 as well. I'm not opposed to, like you mentioned, sometimes a friend will say like, oh, but what if this happened? And it's like, oh, but what if that happened? That would change everything. And in cases like that, I won't necessarily rewrite everything, but I will go back through and leave notes for myself of like, with this new idea, here's what has changed. I'm a big fan of, Drafting Me is a big fan of this. Revisions Me hates Drafting Me for doing this, but in drafting, I'll just put like / and then this happens, and come up with some good witty quote here, or making a change here. And it's really easy to like search for all of those later. Yeah, your mileage may vary though.
Especially if you know it's something that you're going to be stuck on for a while.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like for the most part, I'm trying not to do a ton of editing as I go, unless it's something pretty minor, which I know is kind of counterintuitive. People are like, why would you tinker with the lines if that whole line could go? But it's like, sometimes it feels good to make a line really pretty. Sometimes I feel really confident when I spend an extra 5 minutes and go back and make that line really shine. And revisions are all about tricking yourself into finishing them. So.
Yeah, when you're saying that you use the slash and like whatever is supposed to go there, I have used like brackets for a similar effect, but I have like been trying to push through those to like, I'll do that and then I'll just like sit and think about it for a few days and then I'll come back. Because otherwise when I get done with it, I'm like, how many times have I done this to myself? All I've done is put future work and delayed it.
Yes. That is so smart. I do that more when I'm revising, because at that point I'm so close to it that I know I've just created a problem I'll have to fix next week. But when I'm drafting, it could be months before I have to look at it again. Nicole said, I have a tough time with revisions. The writing is never as good as I remember or thought it was during the first reread. I hope to conquer revisions this year. I feel like there's a really rough moment, like in between the first and the third or fourth draft, where it's like, oh, I'm making it worse. It's gotten worse for sure. And it never is. It just feels that way.
It's just because you're so used to seeing it, it gets to a point where you're sick of seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I'll write and I'll think, I just wrote the best thing ever. And then the next day, I'm like, this is garbage. You walk away from it for like a week, 2 weeks, and then come back to it, you're like, okay, you know what? It's actually not that bad. I was just being dramatic.
Oh, I'm the queen of that. Like, I will, even in the time away from a book, I'm trying to get better at this year. I'm really bad about writing in huge spurts and then taking a huge break and not even thinking about it or looking at it. And in that time away, there's a sweet spot where this is a useful time away, and then there's an amount of time away where it becomes, you start to think, what if it's actually not good enough? And what if everything I've done is not good enough? Because like nothing has been good enough yet. And yeah, every time I come back from that, you have to like claw your way back. And then I get there and it's like, oh, well, now I feel silly. This is fine. Here I was telling my friends I was going to quit.
And I wish there was like a tried and true, like it works every time. You're like, oh, for me, if I wait a month to reread, then we're good or whatever. But I feel like it just, you try and various things and some of it works how you want and some of it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it also has, for me personally, it has to do like what part of the writing process I'm in. Like if I'm in the drafting phase and I take a day away, for whatever reason, my brain scrambles and I have to reread like the last 2 days worth of writing to get my head back in the game. So like I try to do like a little bit every day, even if it's just less than 100 words. It's just staying familiar with the storyline as I'm writing it. But I feel like my main gap is going to be between the second, like, or I guess the first pass of like revisions. Like, all right, I already drafted it. I'm going in. I'm cleaning up any holes that I see. I'm doing most of the research of my brackets. And then I take a step back and like, if I have like a character name or like something that I have to name, I'll take like the time to still research that. So like my head's still kind of like in the same world, but it's less writing and more just kind of like brainstorming.
Yeah.
That's my key. Like that's my key area of like being able to take a step back. Because I know that when I'm going back in, I'm going to be starting from the beginning anyway, and that's good.
Yeah. I'm curious. So once you all have the first draft completed, do you have a set of steps that you follow? Like, do you give it space, do a read through, send it to someone, or just dive right in? Like you already know what you need to fix, so you get started. Like, is there something you typically go for there?
For my first 2 books, I just followed Susan Dunnard's recommendations of like how to
for my first like 5 books. I did that.
So I'll probably take some of that into this third one, but I do like doing like writing an edit letter to yourself. I don't remember if that was one of her steps or not, but it kind of combines like this is what needs work with like these are the things I really like about the book, because sometimes when you're revising it can all feel like trash and then you're like wait no we do like some things that we're trying to do. But yeah, as far as like a specific time away or anything like that, not anything concrete. Usually I'm trying and failing to get something ready to like apply to like a pitch contest or like a writing mentorship program. But I'm just so slow in my drafting process that like I never seem to hit the window except for like a few times. So
yeah. I just put a link in the chat. If you've been with us any amount of time, you've heard us reference Susan Dunnard's Guide to Revisions. But I put the link in the chat in case you've lost it. Her site got like a what's the word I'm looking for? Makeover. Revamp. Yeah, revamp. So it's in a slightly different form. You'll have to go down a bit to find the first one, but fantastic. Cannot recommend it enough. Especially if you're struggling with where to start. I think my process has developed 100% into what it is now because she wrote it so well and in such just like a scientific way. Like revision, sometimes drafting can feel magical. For me, revisions never feels magical. Revisions is always like, I'm working super hard right now.
Yeah.
Is it specific to like her genre, or it can be adapted to anything?
It can be adapted to anything. She just talks about like, so step one, this is how I figure out what I even have to work with, breaking it down into plot, character, setting, and like miscellaneous, and how she does her read through to track down all these things. Yeah, it was immensely helpful for me when I didn't have my methods as set as they are now, or as
what are they now,
familiar. I don't usually wait very long because, like I said, I tend to write in great bursts of speed, and if I have the momentum, I don't want to lose it because I can lose it for a little bit, which is what I'm working on for this year. But so I might wait a day or two, but if I'm feeling inspired to keep going, then I just dive right in. Once I start approaching the climax of the book, I usually keep like a notebook of just here's what I think I'm gonna need to fix. And then I still always do a read through, like top to bottom. I don't take as extensive notes as I used to when I was following Susan Dennard's really closely. Yeah, it ends up coming out kind of like yours, Leah, in like edit letter form. Just like here's every big picture thing I think needs to be fixed, and here's my ideas for fixing them right now. Just kind of on the page.
Yeah, that's one thing I started doing is just keeping a running log. Mine's a bullet point list of things that like as I'm writing, as I'm drafting, it's like, okay, I need to figure out what this piece of information, I have to put that back, smoking gun, whatever chapter, like foreshadowing and all of that stuff. Instead of going back and doing that, which just causes a spiral effect to happen for me. I just kind of keep that running list of bullet points like at the top of my Scrivener document. That way it's there. I can add to it whenever I need to. I remember making like, I had a stack of things. It was like 2 notebooks, Post-it notes, index cards. I used Scrivener. It was so many things. And I thought it had to be so like routine and it had to be the same. And I had to follow all of the steps. Whereas now it's literally just, I'm throwing stuff on the page, see if I continue to like it as I'm writing it. Then I go back and I'm like, okay, let's look at my list. Let's start at the top. Because that way I know like that bullet point list is going to be in the same order that I'm actually going to be reading in. So it makes it a little bit easier. Still sucks. Still hard, but still my favorite part of the process. But
yeah.
And Griswold, you say that you focus on character arcs a lot with your maybe first revision pass. And I think that's very smart because a lot of times what I think I've done for a character and what actually come across is
Yeah, for me, my non-negotiable are my note cards. I just keep them on me all the time. I use them when I'm plotting, and then I redo them. Like I don't use the same note cards. And I'll write out after the read through like what's every scene that I have, and then I try to look at like what are the biggest things, not like add a line in this chapter that foreshadows this thing, like, but like what are the big holes that I need to fix? How do I make the arcs look good? And I write down just a very quick chapter summary, something that like I'll know what that means. One per note card. And then I don't know if I have any with me. You can see them back there on that coffin just a little bit. But I will just assign them a color. because there's usually, 3 or 4 big things to fix. Assign each a color, and then I just go one by one. Like, okay, well, the biggest thing to me is this character's arc is messed up. So let's add something to each of these scenes that I could do, like stick a pink post-it note with a bunch of notes on it. This is what I would fix in this scene to fix that thing. And then spread them all out, make sure it looks good, and then run it again, and then run it again until they're all on there. And then not only am I able to look, I just put them all over the floor. It's a huge mess. It's a huge problem when the dog gets in. But I get to like look down and see, okay, everything looks like it's gonna be better once I put those things there. And then I also have a game plan mapped out at that point because I have added to every scene notes of what needs to get changed. So that's I've done it probably since the second book I ever revised. And I will do it forever, I think.
I think that's one part of the process that I kept, is that I'm not so much a pantser as I'm just a loose plotter, where I used to be like plotting was religion. And I do the same thing, but mine is all digital. It's called Plotter, is what I use.
I love Plotter.
I used to use index cards. I rarely handwrite anything anymore because my handwriting has always been just really, really bad in general. But I like that I could go back and edit, and I can copy and paste, and I can drag them over, and it just gives me a better visual. And it helps that we found these massive Samsung monitors on sale a couple years back. So they're really wide. So nice. Like I could just have my whole timeline there, and I'm like, this is very nice.
I should get
the dream.
And this monitor breaks. I'm gonna get a wider.
Highly recommend going wider.
I use Plotter a couple times. I never use it for my like first round of revisions. Usually in my second or third round, when I'm trying to make sure that every character has a good, because I have a lot of POV characters usually, and I want to make sure that everyone is getting the amount of screen time I want, that everything looks smooth and I didn't miss anything. I use Plotter for that every time. Just like give each character a line so I can see where I've dropped the ball. I've also done it for checking the days that are occurring, the chronology of the book. Like, how is it always Thursday or something? Just cut out each day and then shift things around. I love it.
Something I'm doing while drafting that I'm hoping will be like a good job, Leah, this will help with revisions, is that I have just like a spreadsheet with the scene and then like what day it is, just a number count, because I don't have like days and weeks I'm doing. And then I have like the current word count of each scene and stuff like that. So I'm like, so then I'll have like an idea of like, this one's really big. Maybe, this should be 2 chapters or whatever. But just keeping track of the timeline, that way I think might be good for me in revisions of being like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's very smart. I should do that next time. I'm like taking notes, like, well, next time I get to draft, as if I'm ever going to be done revising the 2 books that I'm currently revising.
See, I'm over here like, I want to get to the revising, but I'm never going to get there.
Yeah. I've been revising this vampire book forever. Kyra and I have been revising the book we've written together for like 8 years at this point, because we keep declaring it done and then declaring it dead, and then something happens that's like, well, let's bust it out one more time. But this is the year I'm gonna get to draft a new book. I just finished reading, where is it? I don't have it by me. I just finished reading Looking for Love in All the Haunted Places.
How was that?
I think her name's Claire Kahn. It was really good. I know it has like kind of mixed reviews. It was 100% for me.
Okay, all right.
It had a Hill House like homage within the first few pages. But I was like, that's Hill House. Okay, let's go. And then it was like the house is sentient and creepy, but like still very much a romance novel. Yeah, I had a great time. it was super fun. And it made me super want to work on my ghost book idea.
Yay!
So I gotta finish revising.
What was the name of it?
It's Looking for Love in All the Haunted Places. Let me double check the author's name. I think it's Claire Kahn. Yeah, who has written a few like YA romances before.
Yeah,
Let's
I
Talk
like
About Love. And
yes,
yeah,
that's the one I really liked.
yeah. So I thought it was super good. I was so glad I picked it up just on cover alone. I didn't even read the description. I was like, I'm sold. So
Cover did its job.
yeah, the cover did its job. It got me, and I read it in like a week. So
It's
super good. Okay, let me look through these questions I've got put together. So we talked about Susan Dennard's Guide to Revisions. Is there any other like book or blog or how-to that you all like to use during your revisions?
Not me particularly, only because my main experience with writing was drafting. Because I like revise as I was writing and it wasn't working for me. That's really all I know up until this point. I was all like, oh, if I plot everything to a T, then I won't have to revise that much. And that was a total lie that I told myself. I see that now. It was an insufferable lie that I told myself. But I think the revision process is something that I need to like relearn or rebuild moving forward. I have a lot of drafted manuscripts, not a lot of revised manuscripts.
But hey, that you've got the hard.
I've got something
is part out of
That's why I think I like revising, because like I've already written it. It's the idea is already there. It's already done. I just need to make it look pretty now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have necessarily specific person who talked about this, but I think just in general, a lot of authors have about finding like your words that you use very often when you draft, and just having like a list of that in once you're getting to like the line edit level. But I also, because
shared something, I can share it with you too if you don't have it.
okay.
It was a list that their editor gave them that they got permission to share. It was, I think, on Blue Sky. And there's like 75 words, and some of them like I didn't even think about like looking up, and I'm like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll have to find it and I'll have to share it.
Yes.
I'll put it in the Discord.
Okay.
Yeah. But like in addition to that, I am someone who I have to like think through how someone shows various emotions. I use the emotion thesaurus as I'm drafting, but also in revisions. Yeah. And I'll just like go down and be like, okay, we're gonna use this for anger or whatever. And sometimes I choose one and people read it and they're like, well, I don't see how this depicts this what you wanted to. And I'm like, well, I just picked it out of the thesaurus, so I'll try again.
So are you right, or is the thesaurus right?
And apparently there's one for facial expressions too. I find that's a weak spot for me. Same
I
writer.
gotta look into that.
Oh, but it's for facial expressions.
Yeah, I love. They recently, in like the last few years, I think, came out with a bigger version of the emotion thesaurus, and I bought that. I just love. This is like, yeah, I use it every single time I revise because I just fall back on the same four. Like, how many times can someone's brow crease, you know?
Right. They're lifting their eyebrows a lot. Something
a
wrong.
lot.
I saw somebody write like, you're only allotted one eye roll per book, make it count. And I'm like, I can't, it's like one per chapter. Are you kidding?
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this during the writing craft book club, but I do love to just go to a random exercise from the emotional craft of fiction and just kind of use it, see if it jogs anything that I want to revise. And this has kind of become like an unofficial tradition for me, but I typically do read a new book on craft at some point during the revisions process. even though once you've read enough books on crafts, they really do all say the same things, just in different ways.
Yeah.
But reading it in a different way sometimes helps me to be like, oh yeah, and I could do this.
Yeah, the emotional craft of fiction, there were so many like character exercises where I was like, oh, this would be great for revision. I'm like not there yet, but like someday.
Or what's the big one? The John Truby one, The Anatomy of
Anatomy of
Story.
Story. I haven't read it yet.
But he's got this one exercise in it that really helps you break down like which characters are foils to each other and in different ways. And I like to do that a lot in revisions, because I do feel like for me, I have to write a whole draft before I really know all the characters. Sometimes I have to do 2 drafts before I really feel like I know them. Yeah. So next question. How many rounds of edits do you like or feel like you typically need to do before you're like, okay, I'm ready to send this into the world or to someone?
To someone, probably 4. Into the world, probably, like if I'm thinking linearly, like 6 total. Probably I've read it more than 6 times, but like 6 legitimate pass-throughs.
I feel like sometimes revisions bleed into each other.
Oh yeah.
So like it can be hard to like say distinctly like, this is my draft number 7, or is it 8.5 or whatever. But having gone through the querying process just with one book, with that one, I want to say I started querying it after 3 revisions. And then I continued to revise as I was querying based off of not actual feedback, but was just trying different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lack thereof was highly motivating in a lot of my post querying.
Yeah. So like between 3 to 4, I want to say for that one, but I think it could honestly vary for whichever book, because obviously sometimes you tell a more complicated story, and so that can have a lot of moving pieces to it.
Yeah. I think I usually send mine to a couple friends after the second like big round of revisions. I'll like read it, then I'll do all the structural stuff, and then I'll read it one more time and just fix like little things here and there. And then I'll send it to a couple friends. But then after that, I probably do another 2 point whatever rounds of revisions. Like just another pass based on their feedback, and then another round of line edits. Yeah, I think Morgan had a question about this earlier. What is a good point to send a revised draft to an editor? Like how many passes is good before sending it to someone else? I'm hoping to self-publish by December of this year or January of next year.
I have some friends who have self-published and who have worked with editors, and I would say they've done a developmental edit and polished it as much as they can before they send it to an editor, because the editor is going to have developmental edits probably as well. And then you'll make those revisions and then move into line edits and stuff like that. So I want to say bare minimum would be 2, but that's obviously not a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, I think especially when you're paying for an editor, presumably when you're going to self-publish. So you just want to make sure there's nothing in there that you couldn't have caught yourself. Or if it is, that it's something that you just really have no idea how to fix. Then you can see if they have any ideas. The only thing is you don't want to like send it in and be paying a ton of money if it's like, oh, well, I could have fixed that part on my own. Like you want to make sure they're really hitting you with the surprising things.
You want to get the most for your money.
Yeah. I had a question that's a little related to this, like sending it out. So a while back, we had a chat scheduled on beta reading, and a bunch of people couldn't make it, and so I rescheduled it, and then a bunch of people couldn't make it again. But now you're trapped with me, and you must talk about beta reading. So we talked about like bringing in beta readers. I was curious, in an ideal world, do you all have an ideal number of beta readers that you like to have for your work, or that you would like to have for your work in the future?
I like having an odd amount in the group, like, because you might send out to multiple beta groups. So like you might send it out to 3, and then based on their revisions or based on their feedback, you revise, and then you might send it out to new beta readers. And I feel like each group, I like having an odd number. That way, there can be a tie break, because I'm a very indecisive person. So if I have to be at the tie break, I'm like, critique partners, what do you think? And they're like, it's your book. And I'm like, I know.
But
yeah, that's a good tactic. I like that tactic. I don't know if there's any like a set number that I would want. Like I feel like if I had to pick a number, it would be at least 3. I do like the odd number aspect of that too. But for me, it's like, okay, who am I sending it to, and what kind of information am I going to get from that person? Because no 2 beta readers are going to be the same. So it's going to be like, is one more, like structural, is one more copy edit, is one more. I have not the greatest skill set when it comes to grammar. So like that would be something that like I'm not going to focus on too heavy when I'm going through the edits. I'm going to do the best that I can, but I'm going to be upfront and be like, hey, this is where I struggle. Who is good at that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I typically have 2 or 3 beta readers. And sometimes I have a super nice friend who reads it a second time for me, usually Kelly or Kyra. If it's like, I need you to look at this and tell me like that it's not worse, and that I'm going in the right direction. I know some people like a lot more. For me, there's like a point of diminishing returns, and I do feel like I think this is my 13th novel, the one that I'm querying right now, and I've revised most of those. So I feel like you do start to build up an intuition a bit of like, okay, I can tell that this is good enough, or I can tell that this is not.
Yeah.
And so you really just need a few like outside people to be like, hey, here's this huge thing you missed. Because there's no such thing as being fantastic at revisions and getting it right every time. But
it was interesting. We had a local author at the library this past Saturday, and she was talking about beta readers and how if it's not someone who has like an expertise in writing, as she phrased it, then she'll go for like someone who has an expertise related to the book, like a police officer, to read the book to like see if there are any things that like crime wise are like seems unbelievable, or like you're missing this or whatever, or like someone who's really into boats or something like that. And I thought that was an interesting way to go about it. Like I think a lot of times, especially when you're a beginning writer, just finding anyone who will beta read, you're just like, okay, excellent, great, thank you so much. But I think it might be interesting if further down in people's careers, that they have those type of books that they're writing where they need some expertise, to have that specific type of beta reader would be interesting.
Yeah. I was curious, do any of you / us have tips for people trying to make new writing friends and like hoping to send their books out to people at some point, but not really having a huge like writing friend group yet? Do you have any tips for them?
Yes, with the caveat that like social media is kind of right now. So I do find posting about your book, like whether it's just like a little pitch or just like memes, jokes and stuff like that, can draw people in. I know like a lot of times if you comment with like a looking eyes emoji at someone's post, then that indicates to them like, oh, I'm potentially interested in reading more about this. And so like kind of using that as like a starting point can sometimes help, to be like, hey, do you want to read the first chapter, or something like that. But then sometimes public libraries, depending on where you are, might have writing groups, or you could always try and start one out on your own as well. But yeah, I think those would be my 2 tips.
I was going to say social media too, but for me, it's less like pitching my book and it's more pitching myself. So like it's creating posts that are like similar in vibe to like the actual book, because the book's going to have this, a similar vibe as me, but it's more like making connections with people. That way it's not like, I see like all the horror stories right now about like books being pirated during like ARC reviews and like stuff like that. Like that fear is still like embedded in the back of my head. So it's like, again, like I would want to know the person so that way, A, I can trust them, and B, I know the kind of feedback that they would be provided, or that they're going to be able to enjoy what I write because they're actually looking for that kind of thing. But at the same time, reaching out and like just even being active on social media can be like really, really tough. I feel like I lucked into this group a bunch of years ago. Like it was just kind of like a, hey, what are you guys doing? This is great. Okay, let's do this. And it was just kind of like it was just a moment that we all just so happened to be at the same place at the same time. So like manufacturing those moments is virtually impossible, but just start posting. You never know like who's going to see it, who's going to read it. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. The algorithms now are getting so good that like you don't even have to have hashtags most of the time anymore. It's going to find the audience that it needs to find. Just be more active. Especially, I think there's a lot of like book talk is like on Threads. And I feel like that's where you're going to find like a lot of people who are going to be like open to beta reading or open to talking about stuff is going to be over on Threads.
I think just like being friendly. Like you mentioned, Kaylin, that it feels like we like lucked into this, and it does feel that way, but it was also like we were posting and we happened to, all just collide at the exact same moment, and that doesn't happen if you're not trying, and just knowing, not every person you tweet at is gonna engage, and like don't spam someone. If they're not engaging, then just like okay, not that one, let me find someone who's a better fit. And yeah, sometimes it does take a minute of putting yourself out there. I know there's like a writer group that I'm a part of that a few of us like followed each other on Twitter, a handful of us, and then one person was like, hey, I want to start a group chat. And I was nervous, but I slid into her DMs and I was like, can I be in that group chat? And that's scary, but like when someone's doing something like that and they open the door a little bit like that, that's when you should go for it and like be brave. And
yeah, it's especially hard when you have that like imposter syndrome that's still like weighing you down. Like, yeah, I want to be a part of this thing, but am I good enough to be a part of this thing? Am I at the stage now where I should be to be a part of that thing?
Are we friends enough for me to
Are
be
you
part
friends
of
enough? Right. Like you won't really know unless you put yourself out there and like try it and like kind of like poke at it slightly.
Yeah. And it does. Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes it feels weird being like, hey friend. No? Okay, I'll try the next one. But like, yeah, that happened to us. Like we tried for one group, like, hey, friend, question mark. And then, okay, the next one was like a really great group and we all got along. And yeah, just got to go for it.
And I think sometimes if you are like applying to mentorship programs and stuff like that, that can be a natural spot where people are like, hey, can anyone read over my first chapter before I apply? So like that might be a good stepping stone for you. Like you might not stick with them as a beta reader, but like if you're nervous about it, knowing that they are also submitting might alleviate some of that anxiety a little.
For sure. And start small. Don't send them your whole book at once.
Nope.
Just try like 1 to 3 chapters for starters.
Do a vibe check first.
Yeah, vibe check. One last question about beta reading for you two. What kinds of feedback do you hope to receive when you send? Like, what are you hoping they will give back to you when you send them your book for feedback that you could maybe also give to other people when you're beta reading for them? But what do you personally hope to get?
Honestly, I love live reactions where they leave a comment or an emoji as they're reading of like, oh my gosh, to whatever thing has happened. Those are very gratifying as a writer to receive. But also just like, in general feedback of like, this is really hitting for this character, or no, this needs to be changed, or like just knowing why something isn't working can help you start to figure out what to do to make it work. So yeah, I think the most gratifying are the ones where they're like, yeah. But as far as like actually making the book better, when they can explain like the why behind what they're thinking, or why something made them think a certain way as they were reading, helps me.
Yeah, I think in the same way. I was going to say I would hope to receive the same type of input that I would give out. So like I love to annotate as I beta read, to where it's like I am going to be really excited about the cute moments and I am going to put in the emojis and stuff like that. I think one thing that I know that I kind of struggle with is going to be varying levels of continuity of like where the placement of the person is in the scene. I'm not very good at like depicting like I don't want to put they walked across the floor, because I'm like, is it necessary? But then when I get feedback and it's like, how did they get from here to there? Like there's no like flow of motion. And I'm like, I guess I have to be creative with how they move around. But I think continuity for me is going to be really big. And grammar is big, but from a beta reader, I don't think I expect like a whole lot of grammar like things. Like that's going to be something that's going to be like a later part of the process. So sentence structure, like if something doesn't feel right as you're reading, like, hey, this sentence is good, but maybe arrange it like this, or like that word doesn't necessarily fit the vibe of like what you're trying to like portray, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. I also like in book feedback, I really like just give me a few paragraphs at the end of just what you thought needed fixing. Obviously I love positive feedback too. Who doesn't? I don't feel like I need a ton of it, but I do like to see like, when did you like it? When is working? Not just for an ego boost, but also like, can I do that more? Can I do that again?
Should I cut this, or should I keep it?
Exactly. I also really like when a beta reader can point to the moment that something isn't working for them. Like, this is where you've lost me on this. I'm not convinced anymore. I don't believe it. Or I thought this was like a really funny book, and now you've lost me here because it's not funny anymore, or something like that.
Sure.
Not that I've gotten that feedback before. Yeah, I like that a lot. I really like giving feedback in a similar way. But if that's not intuitive for you and it's something you want to do a bit more, my recommendation is to just write in the comments every little thing you're thinking. Like, I always, when I'm beta reading, I just write whatever comes into my head in the moment, and I'm not trying to make it sound the way I would actually want to convey that feedback to the person. Like, I just write down exactly what I'm thinking. Like, I don't like this. No, I don't think this is working. I really like this. And then afterwards, I just go through and change the comments, so that I feel like I can better convey why I liked it or why I didn't like it once I've read the whole thing. But I just need something there to remind me to come back and leave like, I really love this. This is why I love it. This is not my favorite, and this is why. Just be really careful. Obviously, you never want to accidentally send like a really harsh comment back, but
right.
I would never do that if I was like beta reading for someone in Google Drive or something where they're going to see the comments. Then I take notes separately. But yeah, it's not always my instinct to like compliment Sandwich while I'm reading, but it is very much my instinct when I'm leaving comments for my friends because I love them and I think they're brilliant. And like, I really do think all their books are the best books ever. Oh, we've got a comment from Nicole. I've also seen a few writers with vlogs/websites that make posts saying if you're looking for beta readers, blurb your book and what type of feedback you're looking to receive in the comments or whatever. And I've seen some of those as well. And like the more you put yourself out there in the community, the more you see things like that, like the more opportunities come. Okay. We've got a good question from Nicole as well. Do you have tips for building a habit that keeps you revising? For me, revisions feel less pressing than drafting because in my mind it's done and I can revise it at any time. It's not going anywhere. I'm so guilty of that.
I really like just having a tracker where I have like a list of, however many things I need to do, and being able to cross off that list is exciting for me. It's the same with drafting, but for whatever reason, I feel like revising is just, I don't know, it's just a little bit easier because you already have something on the page. So I do use trackers like that. And then occasionally I'll talk myself into like, oh yeah, you'll get this reward when you complete this revision or whatever. But then a lot of times I just reward myself early. So I don't know that that's a tip.
Yeah. I think having accountability friends can be really helpful. Popping into the Discord if you want to. Just telling someone like I'm trying to be done by this date. Can you ask me on this date if I'm done? Mm-hmm. Or like, could we check in maybe once a week and you just ask if I've done any work on it? I have a 2025 calendar that I put up on my wall and I'm Xing off so I can see if a week passes or 2 weeks or 3 weeks that I haven't written. I'm trying to do it at least once a week. But yeah, it's tricky. Mm-hmm. If it's close, like if I'm on a third or fourth round of revisions, sometimes I'll just send out a query. And then the fear of what if they respond positively is usually enough to push me forward. Or if it's that far along, I know I could get it done pretty quickly if I needed to. Yeah, I didn't do that with this most recent book, and I think I'm feeling that a bit. Like it's taken me a really long time to revise because it's a very commercial hook. And in my heart, I was like, this is the best query I've ever written. So I'm scared to send it out and get a full request when it's not ready.
Yeah.
Which was smart because I have like no offers of rep, so lest anyone think I'm boasting. But it did get like a pretty good request rate. But yeah, sometimes you just need like a little shove in the right direction and doing, or like if there's a pitch contest coming up, you're just like, I'm just going to apply to it and see what happens. Don't do that if you just finished the first draft, but if it's close. Yeah. And you always come to our write-ins.
Yeah.
We'll check in with you at the write-ins on if you're revising. Okay. I've got 2 more questions on my list, which should be like perfect. Do you have any tips for line editing?
I think the one that I always give is to either read it out loud or have like the computer read it out loud to you. Like because then you're like, oh, that sounds really weird. Or you'll catch obviously like a typo where you're like, no, I did not mean purse. um, so I think that one helps me because it also like that's how audiobook readers are going to experience the book too. So I think that helps me from like a rhythm standpoint sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big fan of the change the font or put the book in something different. Usually the line edit phase is when I finally move the book into Word. And so my brain is like, it's something different. It's a whole new book. And look at all these typos.
So I'm curious, do you like type brand new in Word with line edits, or do you like copy and paste and
copy paste?
Okay.
Usually I just like export it from usually by the end of the first draft I'm in Google Docs. I always start someplace else thinking like I'm going to do the whole thing in Scrivener this time. I'm going to do the whole thing in For the Words, and I always end up in Google Docs every time. So usually for line edits, or maybe the round right before line edits, I'll move over to Word. And that makes it feel very final in my mind. Like once it's in there, it needs to be looking good. Yeah, I think just have fun with them. Like, yeah, you're looking for typos, but you're also looking for like lyricism with your word. Like, how can I make it look and feel the best? Does it feel better if I have them observe the thing a line before they have emotions about the thing? Like, I love doing that. I think it's so fun. And we don't give it enough attention because it's usually the last step before you get to do something exciting, which is sending it out into the world.
Yeah. And I think I have fallen into this as well, where like your submission package or like whatever you're sending out for your query, like whether it's your first chapter, your first 10 pages or whatever, you polish really well with line editing. And then the rest of your book, you're like, I'll get to it.
Misty K asked, do you work offline in Google Docs? I always worry about internet connectivity, so I haven't tried Google Docs. I'll work offline in there every now and then. Most of the time I'm somewhere with an internet connection. I just never close the window. So it syncs back up the next time I open and I'm connected to the internet. I've never lost anything in Google Docs before. Though theoretically it would be possible. In the same way that you could lose stuff anywhere.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Experience.
All right. And last question for the evening, and I would love for everyone in the chat as well, if you're here hanging out with us, let us know what you think or what would be your answer for this question. But how do you know or decide when something is ready enough or good enough?
Oh gosh, this
is the hardest question,
right? I struggle with a lot. I think as writers, we get to know a better idea of when something is ready the more that we write. But I think we'll always have that instance where we sent something out too early, or we held on to something way longer than we should have. So I think you got to give yourself a little bit of grace there of like, yeah, there's probably going to be a time where I sent it out too early. But also, I don't know, being optimistic of like, well, if the idea is enough to garner interest from this agent, if I submitted to them too early, if I end up doing a whole big revision, it's not like that gate is like immediately closed unless they're like, never query me again, which I've never experienced. And I don't think any agent would ever do. So I'm not putting that out there as an anxiety for future. But yeah, so like just kind of being kind to yourself of like, okay, yeah, maybe you submitted to that person too early. Doesn't mean you can't ever submit to them again, or that a different project might be more up their alley, which is hard because, you know, it takes so long to write a book and to revise it and get it to a point where you think, okay, I can have other people read this. So I get that it's a long, frustrating process, but like just trying to be kind to yourself in that regard.
Yeah, I think too, especially when you're going for traditional publishing, it's like not only are you wrapping up revisions, you're compiling a list of agents to send to, and it's hard not to start imagining all these alleys you could go down, or like, well, my book is perfect for this agent's wish list. I have to move, or like, I need to make sure this is perfect because I'm only going to get one shot. And it's like,
yeah,
there are not a lot of agents, but there are also a lot of agents. And I've had at least 7 instances where someone had down almost word for word the book I'd written, and it's never panned out. Like, it's always been someone unexpected that I've had the most, like, quote unquote success with. So yeah, I definitely agree with that idea of like giving yourself grace and letting things be unexpected. And it's okay to send it out a little too early. It's okay to hold on to it a little too long. Yeah, I was gonna say this next to Nicole. Are you making it better, or are you just changing it? Because I'm always trying to find something that's wrong with it that could be the reason why it's not getting success. And well, what if I just change this one thing? And usually one of my writing friends looks at me and it's like, you could do that. So yeah, just know it's hard, and you're gonna do really well sometimes, and sometimes you're gonna mess it up a little, but it's not gonna be the end of the world. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just, try to find your people who you can trust to tell you when you're getting too in your head. Or yeah, when you're not thinking enough about it. All right. I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and for all the great conversations that we've had. Next week, we will be back with a write-in. So maybe you'll join us, maybe do some revisions work. Maybe we'll check in, see if you've been revising. Yeah. Let us know in the comments if you're watching this after the fact, your best revisions tips. And we will see you next week. Hope you all have a nice week and don't get too cold. Bye.